Well, I've been thinking about Christmas. I was at the store the other day, and they had already taken all of the Thanksgiving stuff out to make room for Christmas displays. And I thought, well, it's coming. We had an odd little habit in my family when I was growing up, an odd little Christmas and birthday custom, because we could sit on Santa's lap and tell Santa what we wanted for Christmas. My parents, within reason, would give us what we asked for at Christmas time, provided it was safe and affordable. Slingshots, yes. Nuclear weapons, no. So at Christmas, our opinions and desires were sought. Not so for our birthdays, which were always intended to be a surprise. Our parents never asked us what we wanted, and we knew better than to tell them our specific preferences. Birthdays were always a pure surprise. As you can imagine, we preferred Christmas since we had a say in the matter. My parents were sneaky at birthdays and usually bought us things we needed but didn't want, like socks and underwear and new shoes. I would unwrap a six-pack of whitey-tidies and feign appreciation. Thank you, Mother. Thank you, Father. Fruit of the Loom, my favorite brand. And hush puppy shoes. How did you know I wanted those? The shoes were always 2 sizes too big, so they would last until my next birthday. New shoes with toilet paper stuffed in the toe box, which I replaced every Sunday night while watching The Wonderful World of Disney with my family, carefully calibrating the amount of toilet paper required to fill the void, a joy the children of rich people never knew. I've been thinking about stuff I want to do before I croak, what I'm calling my geezer's Manifoesto. I noted at the beginning of this series that I wanted to talk less and listen more, especially to young people whose voices I have too casually dismissed as uninformed and naive. I pledged to put down my megaphone and pick up my ear trumpet. So I want to begin with what I will call the myth of elder wisdom. The myth of elder wisdom. It goes something like this. As we age, our bodies wear down, so our role in society changes from one of production to one of guidance and counsel. This myth presumes that as we age, we become wiser. But we know, don't we? For every older person who grows wiser, there is another older person who grows more entrenched in their prejudices, more debilitated by dementia, more at risk of fears that cloud sound judgment, more resistant to technology and the change it portends. For every person who is broadened by age and experience, another person is diminished by them. The myth of elder wisdom is just that, a myth. It is an idealized hope. It's what we hope for. It is not a proven reality. This myth of elder wisdom has become so prevalent, so culturally ingrained, that we assume its opposite is also true, that young people lack wisdom and can therefore be ignored. Every day is their birthday, so we don't ask them what they want. But I believe anyone affected by the decisions of their elders should have a say in that decision. For instance, if our legislators today are making important decisions about education, climate change, energy, it is only fitting that young people who will live with the consequences of our decisions long after we have died should have a say in those decisions. Their voice should be heard. When the Swedish teenager Greta Thunberg spoke about climate change at the United Nations, she was roundly mocked by people who will be conveniently dead when Greta Thunberg and her peers are suffering the catastrophic effects of climate change. The catastrophic effects of her predecessors' choices. To not include their voices is like a meme I saw of a group of dogs sitting around the conference table under the caption, "Meanwhile, at today's meeting on feline health care." It is based on a photograph taken in 2017 of Mike Pence meeting with the House Freedom Caucus. All the men discussing maternity health care and breast cancer screenings. Not a woman in the room. Shouldn't those people affected by our decisions have a say in those decisions? I remember in the early 1990s when the straight folks in our yearly meeting were discussing same-gender relationships. And several of us stood up and suggested we invite gay people to join the conversation so we could better inform ourselves. You would have thought we had opened the door and invited Satan in for pie and coffee. If the Quakers ever get around in a weak moment to putting me in charge, I will insist that whenever we meet to discuss something that affects others, we must invite the others to be with us, share with us, talk with us, discern with us. Those who must live with the consequences of our decisions, especially the young, should have a say in those decisions. Can I get an amen? All right. There's a curious little story in the Gospel of John of Jesus happening upon a man who had lain crippled next to a pool of Bethesda for 38 years. The tradition was that if you touched the water after an angel had disturbed the surface, that you would be healed. And Jesus comes upon the man, and seeing the man, he takes pity. And he asks the man, "Do you want to be healed?" Now, I have read this passage hundreds of times through the course of my life, and up until this week, I always interpreted it this way. That here was a guy who had been ill, laying next to the pool for 38 years, and he hadn't mustered the moxie to reach over and dip his finger in the water. And so whenever I read that story, it was always interpreted as a failure of the man's part. And Jesus coming along and saying, "Do you want to even be healed? What's up with you? Come on, it's not that hard." But when I read it the other day, I thought more about it and thought it not odd at all. It was simply Jesus not presuming to know what someone else wanted without first asking them. Those who must live with the consequences of our decisions should have a say in those decisions. Do you want to be healed? Like many men of his generation, my father was very ambitious. In 1972, he was offered a significant promotion that would have required our families moving to Columbus, Ohio. It would have doubled my father's pay and put him on the path to the highest reaches in the company he worked for. It was a well-deserved promotion. My father was great at what he did. But before saying yes, he convened a family meeting in our parlor to discuss the situation. 5 kids, he and Mom. where he laid out the choices. If he took the job, we'd have more money, but we'd have to leave our friends. If he didn't take the job, we could stay in Danville with our friends, but it would cripple his chances for advancement, and money would always be a little tight. We'd have to keep putting toilet paper in the end of our shoes. And then he said, we're going to vote on it. We're going to vote on it. And so we voted. And my mother and father, knowing the perilous condition of our family finances, voted to move to Columbus. And we 5 kids, knowing our friends and what was important to us then as young people, voted to stay in Danville. The vote was 5-2, so we stayed in Danville. Now, I don't know how my life would have turned out if we had moved to Ohio. It might have been wonderful. It might have been terrible. I'll never know. But I do know it felt good to be asked my opinion about a decision that would have a profound effect on my life. It felt good to have my opinion heard. It felt like Christmas all over again. Someone asking what I wanted instead of presuming to know, and me ending up with whitey-tidies again. We're entering a time in our nation's life when a relatively small group of people have taken it upon themselves to freely and often decide what the rest of us should do, how the rest of us should live, how the rest of us should be. As all situations that begin with this premise, it won't end well. We'll correct ourselves when we tire of losing our voice. And we'll finally find a way to have a say. Or we could spare ourselves the trouble by listening, especially as we age, listening, talking less, listening more, especially to our young people who have to inherit the world we are in this very moment creating for them. Listening more. It's time sometimes to put down our megaphones and pick up our ear trumpets so we can better hear what others have to say. This is never easy. We have spent a lifetime accumulating our thoughts, our perspectives, our opinions, to lay them down so we might hear the thoughts of another is one of the most profoundly human difficult works I know. It is so easy to fall back on the easy comfort of our past decisions. But as a geezer, I commit myself to speaking less and listening more. So yesterday I was sitting at the breakfast table and my phone rang. It was my son Spencer calling to report that a tree had been blown down in the wind and had knocked out one of his fences. A very amorous bull had escaped, and he wanted to know if I could come help, which I agreed to do. Driving the 4 miles to his farm, I had this lovely vision of me walking up to the bull, speaking in low, calm, Quakerly tones, enticing it to return peacefully to its paddock. And so when I arrived at the farm and Spencer began telling me how one moves a disagreeable bull, I closed my ears. He said, "Don't get near the bull, it will charge you." And I thought to myself, not me. And so I approached the bull, and when I was 10 feet away, the bull with 2 big horns charged me. And in my haste to remove myself from danger, tripped over my feet and fell backwards into a generous heap of cow manure. Laying there in the manure, staring at the sky, I thought to myself, this is what happens when one talks too much and doesn't listen enough. So friends, if you don't want to end up on your back in cow crap, remember this. This week I listen. This week I will consider the possibility that others might know something I don't. And I will listen carefully to what they have to say, thus honoring the God in me and the God in them. Turn and greet, friends.